Okay, this seminar is called From Yeshua to Jesus, the Art of Transliteration. I have found that many people do not understand what transliteration means. There is a difference between translation and transliteration. First of all, transliteration is to write or spell words in corresponding letters of another alphabet. You see, when you have a Hebrew word and we want to put it into English, we can't do that with the Hebrew alphabet. Nobody will have a clue what's being said. So instead, we do it with English letters. That's why you see a lot of transliteration of the various blessings and things like that. When we do the Shema, if you'll notice, I pull up the Shema, I have it written in Hebrew. For those who can read Hebrew, I have it transliterated into English letters for those who can read the English letters but can't read the Hebrew letters. And then we translate it. We have the English come in that says what it says in English language. So that's three different processes. And we're going to talk about transliteration in this. Well, here we have a chart, and we have the Hebrew letters to the far right, and we have the English letters in the columns to the left of the Hebrew letters. We actually have in the center between those columns a transliteration of the pronunciation of the letter. You see, when you have an aleph, we just have the letter there, but then we have aleph transliterated so that we can say that word correctly in English. That's the point. And if you will notice, I have no equivalent to aleph because it's a silent letter in Hebrew. I don't have an A over there, which everybody would be likely to put there, because it can be pronounced anyway. It depends on the vowel that's under it. And so then I have the bait, the second letter. And if you'll notice, I have a bait with a dagesh in it and a bait without the dagesh. Now the dagesh is that little dot in the center. And that says it's said the hard way, the hard sound, and without the dagesh, it means it's said the soft way. So it becomes a B in our language with the hard sound, ba, but with the soft sound, it's a v. They are the same letter in Hebrew. Then we go to the gimel, and we have that as a G sound. Then the dalet, a D sound. Well, this continues on. If you will notice, our alphabet and their alphabet actually follow pretty much the same order, except we leave out the vowels in the English because the Hebrew doesn't have the vowels in their letters. And we also have some different things like the G there instead of the C. Of course, think about it. What is the G, the gimel? What is that? It's actually a camel, isn't it? So we have the C sound in English, ka. They have the G sound. So our alphabetical order even connects in that fashion. That may be incidental or accidental, but it's still in that fashion going the same order. Well, each one of these have their equivalent, and some of them have no equivalent. Notice there's nothing beside the ayin, and there's nothing beside the aleph. So we're going to try to take an English word, Susan, and we're going to transliterate it into Hebrew. Okay, now this is kind of backwards in some respects, but how would you do Susan in Hebrew? Well, the first thing, you have the S sound, and so that could be done two ways actually, but the common way would be with a samik. So the samik would be for Susan. And then you do the U sound. Now there's two ways of doing that. You can do it with a vav with a dot in it. That would be the U. Or you can have the three little dots below the samik at an angle, and that would also be U. So, okay, we have su. Now, here's something you aren't familiar with. we would typically translate that as Susan. We would put another somic there, but that's really not how it's pronounced. Just because it has an S doesn't mean we pronounce it with an S. So Susan actually should have a Z sound. And that's a Zion, not a somic. Now, if you translate the S letter always with a somic, the Hebrews won't pronounce it right. Because they're going to say Susan. If you will notice that Zion has a little line under it, which is the vowel for the ah sound. Okay, so then the next thing we do is we put in a final noon. So that would be Susan. It's not exactly the way I say it in this area. We have our Kentucky nuances, and actually I probably don't have a good Kentucky accent. But my parents were both from the Midwest. Okay, let's think of another one. We've got Charlie. Now, how would you do Charlie in Hebrew? Well, I'm actually doing this for a reason. The truth of the matter is that you have to make an awful lot of concessions. Of course, first we'd have to put down a chet for Charlie. But the Hebrews don't pronounce a chet as cha, do they? So we've got a problem already. And we have that little patak down underneath it, which is the ah sound again. And then we put the resh with the two dots. That's a shavah, meaning there's either a pause or kind of a slur. That's the same thing as a schwa. Schwas can be silent or schwas can be pronounced. And then we do the lamed for the la sound, and you put a dot underneath it, and that's the E. But of course, that would be pronounced Charlie. Sounds more like Carly Simon to me. But anyway, it would be pronounced that way, but you really would normally put a yud on the end of it. So, Charlie. Didn't work, did it? Then we have Frank. Now, the way you get Frank is you would first put a fey down there. And notice it has the little shavah because it's going to actually connect to the next letter. And you have to have something under there, so you got to have a vowel of some sort. And it's going to connect to the next letter, so it's actually going to be a silent vowel. I know that's a hard one for us to think of, but that's what we're really dealing with. And then we do the resh for the R sound with a patak underneath it, that ah. And then we do the noon for the in sound. And we end with a kuf. So, we have a problem. That would work, but it's impossible in the Hebrew language. Because you can't start any of what they call the Begat Kafat letters, or Beged Kefet. Any of those 6 letters have to have a dagesh in them if they start at the beginning of a word, meaning you use a hard sound. You can't even start a Hebrew word with an F. Okay? So, if you write it without vowels, there isn't any way they're going to pronounce that as Frank. Unless you say it's not a Hebrew word, which you put a little mark in there and let them know that it's not a Hebrew word. So it's going to have a pay no matter what you do instead of a fey. And so Frank becomes a prank. Yeah, some people say that's fitting. Well, we have some problems, don't we? You see, you can't make people have sounds that they don't have sounds for. They don't have a cha. So, what do? You get the closest thing. That's all you can do. It's the limits of language. You just can't make it do something it's incapable of doing. So, if I go to Israel, I will probably be called Prank. Charlie will probably be called Carly. Susan, she makes it. But we have to spell it, not separate, not giving the same letter every time for the same letter. It's a little more difficult than it sounds. It sounds like you can just substitute this letter for that letter. Okay, now that's the Sunday school level of analysis. This equals that. This equals that. And that works in addition and subtraction, multiplication and division. It just doesn't work between languages. So when you learn to develop a little bit, you realize, okay, there's more here than this. All right, so let's look at it from the Greek perspective. See, we have Greek letters too, and we have to have transliteration in the same way from the Greek. So let's pick out a few words. Here's my sister's name. Her name is Annette. And so let's transliterate that into Greek. Well, the first thing you do is you come up with an alpha. That's fairly easy. That works with an A quite well. And then you come up with the noon. I'm saying that Hebrew again. Nu. Okay, that works for the N sound. Then you got to have the eh. And so you have an epsilon for that. Eh. And then you have the T sound, which is a tau. So that actually would do pretty well for pronouncing Annette. Well, that worked. Notice how it got a whole lot shorter. Okay, well, let's try Joseph. Well, Joseph, that's English, has a J sound, and actually, Greek does not have a J sound. So we're already starting out with a problem, just like Charlie. Well, we do the best we can. We put in an iota, because that's what the J sound came out of. Okay, so we go to the iota. That's kind of not close, but it's the best you can do. What do you do when they don't have a letter? You write something that was close or something that was at least derived from. And the J sound actually was derived from the iota, so that makes sense to put it in there. Okay, then you do the O sound of the omega. So you have yo here. And then you do the sigma. Yos. And here you put the eh sound. In this case, it's an eta. And then you do the phi sound, the fa. So that's Joseph. Okay, but it's kind of funny. We have a problem with Greek. There is grammar with names. Grammar. Who ever heard of using grammar with names? But that's what they do. They have different forms of your name. It's used differently according to how it's used in the sentence. So, you actually have to end both of these with the us sound, because it's nominative. Nominative case uses us. So you add us, and you can't say Annette any longer. It's Annettus. And you can't say Joseph. It is Josephus. You also have Josephus that you've heard for years. Josephus, that's actually Joseph. But what we're doing in this case is we're not taking it from the Greek and saying how that's pronounced. We're taking it from the English and trying to get that pronounced. So it's Josephus. That's just the rules of the game. We don't have those rules, and so, man, it just really grates against us that we can't say our name in their language the way it should be pronounced. That's life. You just got to accept the fact that languages are different and they have different rules. That's all. Okay, now you will look at this. I'm going to put the two charts here. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm trying to show you that these charts, you read the Greek from left to right, you read the Hebrew from right to left. So the outside columns are going to be equals. These languages are not exactly equal in any way, shape, or form, but I'm trying to put them down there. They actually have fairly close to the same order. But I'm going to put them down there and show you that there's some concepts that aren't in the other language. First of all, you have the zadi, the TZ sound in English. The zadi does not have a Greek equivalent. So if you're going to transliterate from Hebrew to Greek, you're going to have to figure out how to do that. That's a little bit difficult. Okay, then you have the shin. There is no SH sound at all in Greek. They have no ability to deal with it. It's kind of like the Ephraimites. Remember when they had to figure out whether it was Sibboleth or Shibboleth? So they would ask them to pronounce it, and then they knew whether you were an Ephraimite or not. Okay, the Greeks can't pronounce an SH sound. They don't have it in their ears. Just like English people can't really pronounce a chet sound. And what's even more, they really can't pronounce an ayin. Everybody says, I thought ayin was silent. It is to you, but it's not to someone who speaks Hebrew. In fact, the aleph being a silent letter, I remember the first thing that when I was taking Hebrew, the rabbi kept on saying, you're not pronouncing your aleph. I'm going, it's silent. Yes, but you're not pronouncing it. What am I not getting here? Let me give you a case where you pronounce a letter that is silent. Yaakov. Okay, that hesitation, that is a silent letter being pronounced. If you're not careful and you don't make these distinctions, the Hebrew won't have a clue about what you're speaking of. Okay, so let's look at another letter. There is the chet. There is no equivalent at all in Greek. Okay. And then the ayin. There is no equivalent of an ayin in Greek. Incidentally, ayin is spelled with an ayin, and I am pronouncing it. It doesn't sound like ayin. That's an unpronounced ayin. I'm saying ayin. Do you hear a difference? Okay. A Hebrew would. See, that's the problem. You can't hear it. And I know I'm doing it. It took me probably 15 years to actually be able to hear these things. And I still don't pronounce them right all the time, but still, they're there. And any Hebrew who has been taught to speak properly will hear those. Now, not every Hebrew in Israel is taught to speak properly because, after all, they came from France, they came from Russia, they came from America. They all had a linguistic base before they went to Israel. And so they have to learn it like you all do. And when you don't have the sound, you don't have the sound. And it's just so hard to hear the difference. Okay. Now in Greek, we have the theta. There's no letter equivalent in English, so we have to do a th for it. There's no real letter equivalent in Hebrew either, because in Hebrew we have the hard and the soft tav, but it's not really a th. So there's not an equivalent there. We have the xi in Greek, xi. You don't hear that too much, do you? How about the psi? Psi. All right, let me tell you about sibilants. We're getting into some things with transliteration that we don't think about at all. So I'm going to just tell you, this is some weird stuff. Sibilant basically means the sound of hissing. And so those are the letters that make hissing sounds. All right, let's look at some of them. In English, we have the S as in single. S, s. And we have the Z as in zoo. Z, zoo. We're buzzing it. Those are two different sounds, but they're both sibilants. And then we have the C as in certain. S. Sounds very close to the S, doesn't it? It probably is. But we have a letter that's different from the S that makes the same word, same sound. Boy, this is beginning to sound like Hebrew. You know, all those letters sound alike, don't they? Okay, then we have the T as in condition. That's a sibilant. Now, a T wouldn't be considered a sibilant all the time, but when you use it in this fashion, it is. If you were saying travel, it's not a sibilant, but in condition, it is. We have the SH sound as in should. That is a sound we have, but we don't have a letter for it. You see, the Greeks do have the Hebrews do have a letter. We have the CH in machine. That's a sibilant. These are diphthongs. The TZ as in Houtz. You have to work real hard to get this TZ sound, so I had to use my own name. It was easier. The X as in Rex. That's a sibilant. And the X as in xylophone, which is a different sibilant. Same letter. So in English, our S is pronounced two ways, which we have pointed out with Susan. S as in single or miss, and Z as in is or these. Hebrew has several sibilants. First, you have the samic, like our S in single. And we have the Zion, like our Z in zoo, or our S in these. We have a shin, which is like our SH in sheep. We have to have a diphthong to do that one. We have a sin, like our S as in single. They have a zadi, and that's the TZ or TS sound, as in let's, as in Houtz. And then we have the Sav, if you're an Ashkenazi pronouncer, which is an S as in our miss. Now, Sephardics don't pronounce it that way, so it wouldn't be pronounced, it wouldn't be considered a sibilant with Sephardic pronunciation. Greek has fewer sibilants. It has the sigma, like our S in single. It has the zeta, like our Z in zoo. It has the xi, like our X in xylophone, almost. Not quite, but it's the best we can do. We have the C, like our PS, as in psychology. So, that's what we got to deal with when we're dealing with Hebrew, Greek, and English. Now that we've got this down, let's try to discern how to do some transliteration. First of all, you have two words. And if you've noticed in most of my talking, I do a little bit of interchanging of Yeshua and Yehoshua. Yeshua is actually Aramaic. Okay, Yeshua is kind of a short form. It actually developed into the Hebrew by the 1st century because they learned how to speak Aramaic in Babylon, and they were speaking they were speaking the Aramaic, and if you look in Scripture, you'll actually find that these names are changed. There's several times that Joshua, Yehoshua, in the Hebrew text, you will see it written as Yehoshua. We translate that into English as Joshua. Okay, but if you go into some of the prophets, you will find Joshua spoken of, and he's not called Yehoshua, he's called Yeshua. So in the prophets, it was during the time that they were in Babylon, so you see they translated his name into Aramaic. That's interesting because we rarely translate names. We usually transliterate names because it's important to pronounce them right, we think. In fact, that's the whole purpose of transliteration, is to make somebody say the word properly in another language. So that's what we're trying to do when we transliterate. So Yehoshua is Hebrew. This is how it's spelled in the Hebrew text. I mean, we have the letters here showing you. Now, Joshua is both of these. Just depends on which language you're promoting it from. In fact, in English, if we were going to give a name, we would say Joshua for our Messiah. But we didn't want to do that. Instead, we wanted you to say it exactly as it was originally written. Now, some of these things go kind of awry, you know. Let me show you how that's done. Nehemiah 8:17 says, now notice Nehemiah is written after the captivity. For since the days of Yeshua, the son of Nun, it wasn't Yeshua, the son of Nun, it was Yehoshua, the son of Nun. But since Nehemiah was writing while they were in Babylon, it's Yeshua, son of Nun, until the day the children of Israel had not done so. Until that day, the children of Israel had not done so. Then in Exodus 33:11, it says, so the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend, and he would return to the camp. But his servant Yehoshua, the son of Nun, a young man, did not depart from the tabernacle. Incidentally, it would really be pronounced noon, if that makes a difference to you. And the reason I'm pointing that out is that's the letter. Okay, so how did we get from Yeshua or Yehoshua to Jesus? Because the purpose for transliteration is to help you say it in your language. And here we are saying Jesus, which sounds nothing like Yeshua or Yehoshua. Okay? So, what actually happened is they did a transliteration of the word Yeshua into Greek. That was the first step. Yeshua to Greek. So, let's look at this. First you have the Yud. This is actually equal to the iota in Greek. Let me explain to you. One of the problems is that we're pronouncing this in an English manner. Iota, because if you have a capital I at the beginning of a word, it's going to be pronounced I. But you know, in Greek, it really wasn't that way. let me pronounce, first of all, the I sound was E. So I is E. That's your first problem. And second of all, it's at the beginning of a word. So they didn't start with just the vowel sound, E. It kind of went with what you do when you say the word iota properly in Greek. It's iota. Sounds more like a little figure from Star Wars, doesn't it? Iota. It's a diphthong. You're doing the I and the O together, and it comes to a y. Iota. See what's happening? So in the beginning of a letter, of a word, the I would have a y sound. Now listen. You have a yod and a yoda. They got the name of the letter from the Hebrews. It's the same letter, just with a different symbol. Okay? So we start out, the yud gets replaced with the yoda. And then we have a shavah. Notice the shavah comes right there underneath the yud. And it's pretty much equivalent when it's pronounced to the Greek eta. It's actually a shavah sound. Or, hold it, I said that in Hebrew, a schwa sound. I told you we're jumping languages here, so. So, let's put it down there, kind of the We put that at the bottom, and then we have the shin come down. Now, we have a problem here, because there isn't any Greek letter that has the SH sound. They can't even pronounce it, just like you can't hear the ayin. So what do? You just do the best you can. So, the closest Greek letter is the sigma. An S sound. Sa rather than sha. But that's all they can do. So we put the sigma down there. All right, that brings up the vav. That's pretty equivalent to the Greek omicron. So we'll put that down there. And then we have the ayin, and there isn't any letter at all. So what we do is we just go ahead and take the vowel underneath it, which is the sound, the upsilon, and we put that there, and we ignore the fact that the ayin was there at all. We just call it a silent letter because there's nothing you can do for it. So we move that upsilon down there. All right. There you have it, in Greek. So, we got to this through the Greek language. But if you remember, maybe it would be different if it was in another form. So you can't forget the grammar. You have to follow through with the grammar. If you will look, here is Yeshua transliterated into Greek following all the different cases. You have the genitive, the nominative, accusative, dative, and vocative. This is how you find them in the Bible. It's not spelled the same way every time. If you will notice, in the genitive case, it looks almost exactly like what we have up there, because they don't have to add a suffix in order to change the word. But in the nominative case, they add that final sigma to the end. In the accusative case, they add a nu to the end of it. In dative, again, there is no real change. They don't add a letter. And the same thing in the vocative. So 3 of the cases here do not add the extra letter. But in the nominative, which is the one you normally call someone, it has the extra letter. So, that's where it goes to. the nominative case, it adds the sigma on the end. If you pronounce this in Greek, and I will do the best I can, it is Yeshua. Yeshua. It's not Yeshua, is it? But they're trying to be specific so that you say it in Greek the proper way. That's the intent. That's strange, isn't it? I have a sister-in-law. She's a Hungarian. And she, of course, grew up in Hungary, and then she moved to Canada. Really, really nice lady. She can't pronounce my name like you all do. Because Hungarian didn't have that. Now, she's spoken English, I don't know, probably 50 years by now. But she still has that Hungarian kind of pronunciation. I'm basically wrong. You know what? She's a wonderful person. I don't have to worry about that she didn't quite pronounce my name right. I still answer. I don't just go, somebody talking to me? If you get my name right, I could respond. No, it's not a problem. She's doing the best she can. Now, let's take this now and move it into Latin, because that's what happened. It went from Greek into Latin. So the iota is very closely equivalent to the Latin I, and we have